Good afternoon to everyone. It's 1 o'clock. Today we are meeting as council. We have all five council members present, and we are committee of the whole. And this is where we receive delegations. I believe everyone will know, of course, that we do not make motions or decisions at the committee of the whole. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 1 p.m. And we are here as well in the presence of several staff members, including our clerk and deputy clerk. Welcome, everyone. First order of business is our land acknowledgement statement. The Township of Hamilton is situated within the traditional territory of the Mississauga, Anishinaabe, and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. Our work on these lands respectfully acknowledges their resilience and their long-lasting contribution to the area now known as the Township of Hamilton. Item 3.1, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, that will be recorded. Item 4.1, it simply is a motion to receive the committee of whole agenda for February 10th, 2026 be approved. Mover and seconder, please. Moved by Mark, seconded by John. Questions, comments? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Delegations. Good afternoon, Mr. Torrey. Ralph Torrey, Blue Dot, Northumberland, regarding the proposed Westerville nuclear plant. I personally have had the occasion to be following this a little bit and have had the occasion to be at Canton not too terribly long ago and hear some of Mr. Torrey's presentation. So I will simply say, Mr. Torrey, the floor is yours. The only thing I would ask you to do is ensure the microphone is on.
How's that?
Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor Jeb. I will be quite brief compared to that last presentation that you referred to. And I'm not really here today to express my own views on the potential for this power plant that's been proposed for Northumberland County, so much as to represent a group of concerned citizens here in Northumberland that have come together, all of whom share concerns about the prospect of such a large facility, nuclear facility, being built on the shore of Lake Ontario in our county. Some representatives of the group are here with me today, including Judy Smith, Faye McFarland, and Michael Purley sitting behind me and to my right. And together we worked on putting together the brief which has been sent to you in advance that outlines some of our concerns. We're in the very early stages of reacting and responding to the idea of this plant. We'll have more to say about it, but in the future. But right now, our activity has kind of been pressured by this deadline that came out of the blue, giving people a very short amount of time to respond, issued by the Federal Integrated Assessment Office, which is the agency in Ottawa that will have the responsibility for doing both the environmental assessment and the nuclear safety review of this proposed plant. So you'll be getting to know them in the months and years ahead. What they've asked for initially, in fact, they want these submissions in by this Thursday, is for people to comment on the issues that they think that they should be instructing OPG, who have proposed this plant, to bring forward before the agency so that they can do their assessment. The foundation of any environmental assessment has always been, do we really need to do this? And are there alternatives instead of doing this? And in our early focus on the plant, we've been looking at those issues, which are almost completely absent from the project description that OPG has tabled, but which are nevertheless legislatively mandated in the legislation that guides the Integrated Assessment Agency in Ottawa. They are required to assess the need for and the alternatives to the project. It's not just assessing and figuring out what the remedial actions might be for specific environmental impacts that would come with the plant. Upstream of all of that, in the very early stages, which is where we are now, there is a requirement that the basic need for the plant and alternatives to building it be considered. And that's really what we are recommending at this stage, is that the Integrated Assessment Agency go back to OPG and say, you can't just come in here and say, obviously it's needed, which is essentially what they're saying. You've got to make the case, you've got to present evidence, and you also have to take a serious and comprehensive look at what else could be done to meet that need besides building what they're proposing, which is a 10 million kilowatt power plant. It would be the largest in Canada. It would be one of the largest industrial footprints in Canada, 1,300 acres on one site. That's like twice the size of the GM plant footprint in Oshawa. So this is a very, very large proposal. I think that even within our group, the concerns that it raises can, and we're not all of a unified mind on this. We have a number of different priorities coming into it. I think some of us are concerned just about the scale. I mean, I grew up here. I learned to ski at Camborne. My eldest brother married Elaine Baptist, who grew up on a farm just down the road here. This is a very special, this is personal to me, this is a very special part of Northumberland County, and it won't survive this. I think that's obvious. You may be in favor of what will come in its place, but I think it's virtually not tenable to suggest that Northumberland County, in anything like its current social and cultural and economic form, would survive a 10-year boom where 150 to 200 billion dollars will be plopped down on that site, bringing in hundreds, maybe as many as 2,000 local construction workers over that period. It's a classic boom situation. We know there's lots of experience in what happens. Wages go up, rents go up. These jobs are very well paid, and so it becomes difficult for the local businesses and farming community to compete with what the hydro workers will be making. It's overwhelmingly a male workforce that comes into town. It affects the culture of the community. It changes everything from the social life to just the way things feel, if you want to put it that way, in the community, and it happens quickly. Now, I've been talking to people about this, and some of them say, well, you know, it's inevitable. Toronto is coming. It's eventually going to swallow us up. Maybe that's true. I'm not sure. It needs to be true. But I know it will happen if this plant goes forward. It won't just be Toronto slowly enveloping Northumberland County. It'll be Toronto coming down like a hammer on Northumberland County. That will be it for anything resembling the values and the small town and rural farming culture that has made this such a special place for so long. So support the plant if you want, but go in with your eyes open that this is it for the future of Northumberland County. And I haven't even mentioned the nuclear dimension of this. I'm just saying this is a huge, huge mega project coming into what is still essentially a primarily rural small town culture. And that is a volatile mix. And then, of course, the bust comes at the end of the boom, and you're left with all of the consequences that come on the downside of this kind of a boom. Second, so some of us are concerned about that. Some of the people in our group are concerned about the nuclear dimension of this project. It looks like it will probably, they're probably going to propose that the reactors will use enriched uranium. This takes us into a whole different security regime from the security measures that are associated with our current nuclear reactors, which run on natural uranium, which isn't much use to anybody except someone that has a CANDU reactor. But enriched uranium is another story. It's a so-called class 3 material, and it brings in the requirement for a higher level of security. The fuel will have to come and go in armed convoys. There'll be a higher security presence both at the plant, and you'll feel that in the community. There's obviously the question of the large amounts of nuclear waste that will be on the site. Quite apart from the question that they're still trying to figure out what to do with this in the long run, during the time the plant is operating, it sits there on the surface, and there's a lot of it. And that's the point, that's the stage of its life when it's the hottest and the most radioactive. So we're going to see, if this plant goes forward, the largest concentration of surface storage of high-level nuclear waste anywhere in Canada. There are other safety and security issues that come up for those whose concern about this plant is not only that it's very, very large, but that it's nuclear, and that there are a special set of risks and safety and health and security risks that come along with that. And then the third set of concerns that I see in the group that's come together are not so much the local concerns about the size of the plant or local concerns about the effect that its nuclear dimension will have on the community, but they are the concerns that should relate to be concerns to everybody in Ontario, which is the impact that such a plant will have on the cost of electricity in this province, on the reliability and the resilience of our electricity system. I mean, you talk about putting all your eggs in one basket. This is a 10 million kilowatt plant. We have an average consumption of electricity in this province right now of around 15 million kilowatts. The whole province, everything, all the steel mills, all the factories, the lights, the homes, the buildings, it all adds up on average to about 15 million kilowatts. It peaks in the summertime at around 23. And there's lots of days when it's down around the level that this single plant would be generating, around 10 million kilowatts. So this is a huge concentration of the supply of electricity in one spot, and it's the most expensive, the most capital-intensive form of electricity by far. And it basically is being proposed at a time when the rest of the world is aggressively moving to renewable sources of electricity, which also are capital intensive, but not as much as this, and which distribute their employment, and which distribute their impacts, and which distribute their benefits throughout the community and throughout the communities of Ontario, and don't put all of the risk and all of the cost down on one tiny county, that's going to shoulder this for the rest of the province. So there are a lot of province-level questions as well about the need for and what the alternatives to this plant should be. So you can see some of the specifics in our brief. I guess that last comment brings me back to where I started, is that right now we're recommending, and we would love it if you would also recommend to the assessment agency in Ottawa. By the way, they've had hundreds of online comments, mostly negative. If you're wondering about the politics of this, they've got some headwinds they're heading into. This is not your typical environmental assessment. This is not somebody who wants to build a culvert under their road. This is one of the largest single projects that's ever been proposed for assessment in Canada, so perhaps the largest. So it bears taking time to make sure that it's needed, to make sure that the alternatives are set out in detail and assessed in comparison with what's being proposed. OPG has not done that, and I'm worried, and we've seen this happen with environmental assessments in the past, that if we don't speak out clearly and loudly at the very beginning as citizens, that we really want to make sure that the need for and the alternative of this plant have been comprehensively looked at before we get into a long discussion about how to remediate the impact it's going to have if we do build it, then later on in the process it'll be too late. It'll be, well, you had a chance to talk about the need last year. Now we're talking about how many birds are going to be affected, or how much the waste heat from the plant is going to affect the shoreline, or what the average level of childhood leukemia will be from the routine releases that you see from a facility like this. And if you try at that stage to raise the question of, well, do we really need it, or are there alternatives, you'll be too far down the road, and they'll already be moving into a sort of a pre-construction phase on the site to raise the questions that you would have wished that you raised in the winter of 2026, when you still had the opportunity and when the Impact Assessment Agency has its doors open to be advised on what people would like to see considered in this next stage of assessing this proposed nuclear plant in Wesleyville. So that's an overview of our perspective, and I'll quite happy to take questions. I'm sure my friends and colleagues here today also can help if there's some that they would like to address.
Thank you, Ralph. Brian, did you have some thoughts that you wanted to share at this time? Would you like to do that a little later? Okay, thanks, Brian. First of all, Ralph, thank you. My first thought today simply was when I left the house, I don't know any of us that actually left our homes this morning that would have had the thought, we want to live closer to the world's largest nuclear plant. I'll just leave it at that. I have some other thoughts, but I think I should turn it over to my fellow council members for questions. Would anyone have a question or a comment that they would like to share? Please, John.
Thank you for your presentation. I was very educational. The thing I want to touch on is that I can remember back in the maybe early 70s, maybe mid 70s, there was a resident of Port Hope who came forward at a gathering, and they said they couldn't figure out what this person was doing with a gun facing it towards the no parking signs and stop signs down by the lakeshore. I kind of thought, well, jeepers, that's kind of odd. So I said, just go up there and ask them what they're doing. So they saw them around the next week, or had this so-called radar, or whatever they want, up against a sign, and went out and asked them what they're doing. They were actually taking levels of radioactivity on the signs to see how much is coming down from chemical onto the streets and in the air. And he found it kind of amusing at the very beginning. I thought, gee, this is not right. Why would they be doing that? Because they don't want to contaminate the people with breathing. So therefore, if they're at the proper levels, everything's fine. If they're at the extreme levels, how would they get that out to the public, that you can't go outside and you shouldn't be breathing the air? And like this is the thing I look at today, and I kind of, now with this all comes to light. The same thing is when and I'll just touch on one topic. When you have this radioactive, I'll call it garbage, that comes out of the reactors, where are they going to put that? You say they're going to put it on site, but you've got rain runoff, you've got everything, whether big trenches, canals, or whatever they do. Yeah. But right now they're taking it from Port Hope ground and they're taking it out to this site. And I can remember when that ground was flat. I drove by it the other day and it's got to be at least 15, 20 stories high. It's just out of control as far as I'm concerned. And that material will last for thousands of years. It doesn't go away. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Yeah, there are, and maybe I should have said at the outset, this is a field that I've worked in professionally over the years, so that's helping to inform the response I would give to your question. There are different levels of radioactive waste that come out of these plants. The highest, most toxic, and most dangerous are the spent fuel rods themselves. This is why it took 8 months to shut down Fukushima after the accident, because the fuel continues to generate tremendous amounts of heat even after the chain reaction is stopped. It is full of highly radioactive fission products that are there because it's been inside a nuclear reactor. And right after you stop the chain reaction, the heat goes down to only 7% of what it was at full power, and then it gradually dissipates. So for the first several decades, you can't even think about burying this stuff. What they do is they put it in what are essentially very large swimming pools, maybe about the size of this room, that are at the surface, beside the reactors themselves, where they monitor it, where they keep the water circulating and let it cool down until such time in the future when it may be still not that safe, but safe enough that you could put it in one of these gigantic flatbed trucks with the special enclosures that would take it to wherever it's going to be permanently disposed of, which they're still working on. So you would have those trucks coming and going all the time as well, eventually. Then there are much larger quantities of lower level radioactive waste that's generated just in the day-to-day operation of the plant. Or if there's a piece of equipment in the plant which is radioactive that has to be replaced, then that piece of equipment itself is radioactive waste. It's not high level like the fuel, but you can't just take it to the landfill. So that stuff, the medium level waste, it tends to end up at a special site, again on the surface, at the Bruce nuclear site in Kincardine, and it'll go up there by truck. And then there's a third level, lower level of waste, which is everything from paper towels and disposable hazmat suits and all the rest of it that is used within a certain zone of the plant that has radioactive fields within it, just automatically gets categorized as radioactive garbage. And that stuff, again, cannot be treated like municipal waste. It has to be specially disposed of as well. And again, I'm less clear on that. I think some of it does go up to Bruce, though, as well. So it's a big problem. These are actually quite wasteful plants. And they're also wasteful from an energy point of view. They're steam engines, basically. Two-thirds of the energy that's generated in the reactor is dumped into Lake Ontario. Can you imagine a plant that's producing 10 million kilowatts of electricity is producing over 20 million kilowatts of low-temperature heat that's just going to get dumped into the lake all along that shore. So that's another big environmental concern. You know, it's a lot of heat. Plus you've got Darlington and Pickering and all of the other big sources of waste heat from these big steam generators that are on Lake Ontario, including ones on the American side. So waste is it's a once-through wasteful technology. Coming back to where you started, the waste in Port Hope, it's from a different part of the fuel cycle, obviously. There never was a power plant, a nuclear power plant there. But there has been for years and years, going all the way back to post-war years, as I think all of you must know, the processing of uranium and the making of uranium intermediate products that eventually become uranium reactor fuel and uranium nuclear weapons fuel as well. And that led to large quantities of low-level radioactive waste, which were simply not disposed of or treated or managed with anything like modern techniques at the time. It was made available as fill. So Port Hope bears the brunt. It's one of the ironies of this proposal that it's coming on a town which has, at Wesleyville itself, a monument to the bad planning of Ontario Hydro, where we have a smokestack that's not connected to anything because the plant got partly built because they thought they needed it, because they didn't sufficiently consider the need for and the alternatives to that plant before they started building it. So for decades, we look at a smokestack that was never used. And then at the same time in Port Hope itself, a town which surely has borne its share of the risks and the health effects of the nuclear age, and the idea of putting it at additional risk just seems somewhat perverse to me personally. I mean, everyone will have iodine pills. The probability of a big release is low, but they happen. It happened at Chernobyl, it happened at Fukushima, it will happen again. The difference is that when a nuclear plant when a wind turbine breaks down, the blades fall to the ground, nobody gets hurt unless they're walking by, right? You fix it, it's a week later, you're back up and running. When a nuclear plant has a bad accident, it can ruin an economy. It will ruin a company, and it will certainly ruin the local economy. So yes, the probability of it happening, very small. But at some point, the consequences get so large that you have to ask yourself, why are we putting even the possibility of such a large disruptive event, why do we create that possibility when there's an alternative that distributes the risk in a way that, and I'm talking about renewable energy, distributes the risk in a way that, yeah, there's going to be wind turbines that burn or that fall down, but it's not going to destroy an economy. It's not going to have lasting generational impacts on the environment or the, the fiscal state of the government that has to pay for it. Because these accidents, you can't insure these plants. You probably know that. So there's an act of parliament which indemnifies operators of nuclear power reactors in Canada from more than, I think it's $1 billion per reactor. I think Fukushima is somewhere over $500 billion last time I looked. So when things go wrong at one of these plants, it comes back on the taxpayers, as it always seems to do with this industry. Every time they make a bad decision, it seems like the taxpayers are left holding the bag. And this is for me, one of the reasons why it's doubly important that the need for and the alternatives to the plant are rigorously examined and tested by the assessment agency in Ottawa. Because this is not a private company that's coming forward wanting to do this, where maybe it would be justified assuming, well, looks like they're willing to risk their own money, so I guess the need is there. This is a public utility that doesn't operate like a normal business, and from all appearances, and it's written between the lines right in that project description, seems to have been instructed by their political masters to build this plant. So we have the cabinet deciding now how to run the electricity system. If that doesn't send chills down your spine, I don't know what will. But it just means let's make sure we have a thorough, professional, comprehensive assessment of the claim that is being made by OPG in Ontario that this plant is needed and that there aren't better alternatives. And that's the stage that the IEA assessment is at right now, and that's what we're submitting to this week, and I would encourage you to do the same if you're able to and are of like mind on that. It doesn't involve taking a position on the plant, it just involves taking a position on due process.
Ralph, we got one question out in your answer. We're going to run out of time here.
Sorry.
John, do you have any follow-up? Larry?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. This has been truly eye-opening on this whole project. I think the mayor and I have been in a couple of things about this, and it's about the health safety aspect and the current situation in Port Hope. But I guess, I guess the thing that intrigues me is that you recommend an alternative, solar and wind power. But my question is it going to have the capacity to deliver what's required in the future, solar and wind? And how much land mass will it require to produce the same level of capacity that the nuclear station is looking at? That my one question is. The other one is, I guess this is the whole idea of the submission is, above all the other issues of security and safety, why are they doing this? What is the requirement that we have established in the future growth of our communities and country that we would require power generation to this capacity? I know that with artificial intelligence, the storage of data is causing tremendous amounts of land to be taken up for just the storage of the information that's gathered. And I don't know if that's the reason we're doing this, but I guess that would be part of the submission, is that we take a look at those types of things. And I know Brian has some insight into that. But I'm just shocked at the information that you're bringing forward to us, and thank you. I really appreciate this, and I know we appreciate it. But it certainly is scary. At the outset, we all sort of thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. We're going to bring economy, we're going to bring people, we're going to build houses, we're going to do all kinds of great things. But when you bring your summary and recommendations to us and insight, it's a little different than I thought it was going to be. So I appreciate that, and I thank you. But I guess as part of our submission, that would be, is the alternative going to be the answer?
Ralph, I'm going to do something a little different here, if you're okay with it.
I beg your pardon?
Okay, I'm going to do something a little different here, which is, in the long run, I think will be fair, but won't sound that way initially. Bruce, do you have any questions? Mark, do you have any questions?
Comments if I could.
Okay.
Again, thank you for your presentation. We as the council haven't really discussed anything to do with Wesleyville, so I mean, you're opening that conversation for us, so I do thank you for that. I have similar concerns to what you've presented. I also have the other concern is, I mean, we talk security, we talk about Canada in general. I mean, you know, we talk about what's happening now between Canada and the U.S. and you know, that we can have enemies. And it often worries me, you know, how secure is this plant? I mean, if somebody wanted to really go out and put some damage to Canada, I mean, this is the spot that they're going to hit first. I mean, all of a sudden we have no hydro, no electricity, no nothing. So it's a little worrisome. The other thing that really worries me is what happens 20 years from now with the unknowns. Obviously, you know, there's going to be effects from this plant, and you've mentioned some of them with the heat and so forth with the lake. But what about what's going through the air and what people are breathing and that kind of thing, and the new unknowns that we didn't foresee 20 years from now? So there's a lot of risk and worry and so forth. And I have a lot of people that I know I talk to within our community that really don't want to see a lot of growth and, you know, infrastructure and so forth within our municipalities. They like the rural way of living and the way we live here now. So that also worries me a bit, that when you talk about how many more people and how much it's going to generate and how much, you know, it's going to bring to the area. Some of that's positive, but some of it's really negative to some of us. So it is a little worrisome, and I do thank you for bringing this forward. So thank you very
Brian,
much.
do you want to bounce in now?
Quickly, Mr. Mayor, my comments are just generally with respect to the February 11th deadline. You noted Blue Dot was in the early stages of responding. The IAAC, as you know, is in the very early stages of their assessment. Unless council has sort of a clearly articulated position and wants to respond before that February 11th deadline, there will be multiple opportunities and engagements coming as soon as this spring to provide further comment. That would be my recommendation. I was shocked to learn when I came to Hamilton Township that neither OPG or the province had engaged the municipality directly on the project. Coming from Port Hope, that surprised me given the proximity, but I think that is the case. So to Councillor Lovshin's point, this sparks the conversation for Hamilton Township, but really is just the beginning as far as I can tell. And my recommendation would be it might be more meaningful later stages of the assessment, at multiple points of the assessment, to provide comment at that time.
Ralph, I haven't been fair to you because we had a question. I say, Ralph, we haven't been fair to you. We had a question that you didn't have an opportunity to answer. We try to hear every question and answer, just to be fair to the public, to be fair to our ratepayers, to be fair to our presenters. But this topic is so big, I guess I'm going to throw something out at you. Would you consider coming back at a future meeting as this thing progresses through? And I'm speaking on my own here. I don't know whether my fellow council members would entertain that idea or not. So I'm going to throw that out at you. Would you consider coming back as this unfolds and keep us informed of your perspective of what knowledge you have gained or reflections on the knowledge you already have? So I'll simply throw that out at you at this moment in time.
Yes, of course, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, we'll discuss that. Again, no decisions made at the committee here today, so we'll discuss that. Ralph, have you retained what Larry's question was, and would you like to take a few minutes to comment on his question, or would you like to do that down the road sometime? And again, Ralph, I'm trying to be fair and reasonable to your group and yourself in particular.
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief.
Oh, your enthusiasm,
You know,
Ralph,
I
and
know.
I appreciate that.
I'm chronologically challenged. Let me, let me start with Mr. Gilmer's comment and work backwards to the question. It's true it's early days in this process, but but it's also true that it's not required to take a position on the plant. And that was the last point I was trying to make. What we need now is to take positions on the process, to reinforce to the impact agency the importance at this early stage of ensuring that alternatives to the need for and the alternatives to the plant are being thoroughly presented by OPG. And that is not the case in that current project description. There's one paragraph where they say, we don't think we even have to talk about alternatives because the province has told us we have to do this. And when we talked, a couple of us were online with the IA in one of their web calls a week or so ago, they didn't raise the question of need. I had to quote their act to them. And it's section 22, and it's very clear in there that there's an onus on the agency to review the need for and the alternatives to the proposal in the early stages. There's no point doing it later. And yes, there will be lots of opportunities later to get into the weeds on some of these other questions, like how much land would the alternatives take? What are the radioactive risk implications to the local population? There'll be lots of time to, if you wish, as a council, to take positions on the evidence that OPG puts forward. Right now, we're not there. Right now, it's just saying this hearing needs to be broad and comprehensive on the question of need for and alternatives. And I think they need to hear that from local governments in the area. It's not inconsistent with supporting the plant. And it's not inconsistent with opposing the plant. It's just saying, can we please not rush into this? Because I can tell you, every single time we have rushed into one of these investment decisions in our electric power sector in this province, it's gone bad because the need for and the alternatives was not properly considered at the beginning. Whether you're talking about Darlington itself, whether you're talking about the gas plants in the early 2000s, there's just been a history of bad forecasting and bad planning and inadequate consideration of alternatives from OPG that needs to be tested by this process. That's all we're saying. So I would counter your recommendation by saying that I think it would be well worth Hamilton Township, that you won't regret simply taking the position at this point that you want the process to cover the need for and alternatives to the plant. That's all. In terms of the other questions that councillors raised, the question of why build it, that's another way of asking the need question. And right now, there's a lot of different theories floating around about why this has come up. There's lots of indications that the real goal here is to develop an ability to export electricity to the United States. And so they're building more than is reasonable for Ontario's needs in order to put themselves in that position. I don't know. Everybody's looking for how can this make sense? Because on the face, it doesn't. You don't build a 10 million kilowatt plant in a 25 million kilowatt system. It'll take nuclear above the base load, for those of you who are familiar with that terminology, where it's a disaster economically to try and run a nuclear plant anywhere except in the base load, that electricity demand which never stops. It's always there. But above that, there's the peaks from the heating season, there's the peaks from the air conditioning systems. Those nuclear is very bad at, because nuclear plants can't be shut down and started up. So why are we building a plant that is going to result in us having more nuclear power than the base load itself? Makes no sense unless there's some other reason, but I don't know what it is. And don't forget, parallel to this, there's a proposal that's even further along in the process to build 4,800 megawatt plant, so 4.8 million kilowatt plant at the Bruce, a third set of 4 reactors up there. So there's nothing else going on like this anywhere outside of China, where a government is bearing down on the nuclear option when everybody else is rushing for the exit. So this is one of the reasons why we need to get this out on the table and figure out, do we really need this? And what are the alternatives? Can the alternatives do it? Which was your very first question. I think they can, but we're not going to have that conversation in any fulsome way here this afternoon. But what's happened in the last 10 years is that the cost of wind, especially, and it's going to be wind in a northern country. Solar can help, but we're too far north for solar to do the heavy lifting. So if Ontario and Canada more generally, you can see this in Scandinavia, is going to make the push towards a renewable-based electricity system, wind is going to do the heavy lifting, and it needs to be backed up with batteries. We have the battery technology for the short term. The challenge is, what do you do when it gets cold? Does that ever happen and stay cold? And the wind stops, and that goes on for a week? That's still a big challenge. It's also a challenge for nuclear, for the reasons I just mentioned. You can't just turn a nuclear plant on when it gets cold and then turn it off for the rest of the winter. I mean, the economics are completely not on for that. So there's a future question. The whole reason that we are moving our energy system towards electricity is because of climate change. You know, we're trying to reduce our fossil fuel use. That means electric vehicles, and it means electrically heated buildings with heat pumps. And that means more electricity use, and it means it's peakier electricity use because of the heating. So this is a big challenge. Everyone in the world is focused on it. There's a tremendous amount of work being done addressing your question. Most places in the world are not doing this with nuclear. So there's lots of other examples that you can look at and see what the alternatives might be. And I just think that's the conversation we need to have in Ontario. And right now, the Integrated Assessment Agency is the vehicle that is offering an opportunity for that question to be raised in a rigorous, comprehensive way. What's really the need for this plant, and what are the alternatives to it? Canada, US, I touched on this thing about exports, but you're absolutely right. And you only have to read the papers about what's going on in Ukraine to know the extent to which any nuclear power plant becomes a hotspot in a war zone. And certainly if you have a big plant sitting on the shore of Lake Ontario with God knows how much hot nuclear fuel sitting in spent fuel bays at the surface, it's a target for sure. And it's not so much about blowing the reactor up, which is really hard to do. I mean, those things are encased in concrete. But the spent fuel is much more vulnerable to attack, and there's a lot of it, and it's quite hot, and it makes a heck of a mess if you hit it. So I would be worried about that from a targeting point of view. Plus, you know, you're going to have this material coming and going in these armed convoys, and you know, there's a good reason why those convoys are going to have to be armed. Let's just put it that way. So I think I'll just end my answer to that with a very quick story. I was in Davos last winter at the Economic Summit. The organization I work with was sponsoring a dinner that we hold every year in Davos for the world's leading corporations who are demonstrating exemplary performance on sustainability. So we had 100 corporate leaders or so for dinner in the hotel. And that afternoon, the Vestas Wind Company, which was one of our guests that evening, had signed a deal with Ukraine, with Zelensky, to build a wind farm in Ukraine in a war zone. And Zelensky's comment, and I apologize, I'm saying his name incorrectly, was, we love wind farms because the Russians can take out a central power plant with one missile. A wind farm, they need 50 missiles. They hate wind farms. They're really hard to attack. And I thought, what a great current example of the security risks that you take when you put all of your eggs in one basket, to bring it all back to a farming metaphor. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you for your presentation, and I have all kinds of comments and thoughts myself, but I shall keep them in essence of the time that we're working on here. We do have a prepared motion, and that is that the presentation by Ralph Torrey, Blue Dot, Northumberland, regarding the Westerville nuclear plant on February 10th, 2026, be received. Moved by John, seconded by Bruce. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Oh, I thought that was an all in favor comment.
Just to clarify, are we going to make a submission?
Well, that will have to be discussed in a different format than the committee of the whole, Larry.
Well, tomorrow is the day that it's due. Is that correct, the 11th? That's what's in your report?
We're moving, although it's not a closed-door discussion, we are moving to another opportunity here ahead of us today. Pardon me? Good. Anyway, we can break, we'll get a little information, direction from our CAO and our clerk, and we'll have an answer for that. Because it's inappropriate to have an answer for that at this moment in time, in committee of the whole. Okay, so it's been moved, been seconded. I will say all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we're actually moving to closed session, and we need to transition with our audience and our own microphones and things. So still in open session, under 6.1, we need a motion to move to a closed session to discuss matters permitted under section 239-2, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations, and employee negotiations, re-water operations. And it is recommended the Council of the Corporation of Township of Hamilton enacts as follows: that the Committee of the Whole meeting on February 10th, 2026, move into a closed session at 1:47 p.m. under the Municipal Act, Sections 239-2B and D. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Bruce, seconded by Mark. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. Carry. We'll just close out our committee of the whole meeting. And that simply is that our report out of closed is that staff received direction on the closed session motion. And we'll be proceeding with that action. Adjournment. 7.1 on our committee of the whole agenda. That the committee of the whole meeting held on February 10th, 2026 be adjourned at 2:08 p.m. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Bruce, seconded by Mark. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.